Well, hello everyone. I hope you're enjoying the Arbitrum GovHack Community Day so far. I've really had a great time, and I hope you all are too. So I'd like to kick off this afternoon's panel session. We're going to be focusing on grants and the grant ecosystem. So we've got a great panel on today. Each of these gentlemen are prominent grant program managers. Would you like to give a wave?
Yeah, thanks, Ram. Prominent is a big one, but at least, yeah, I'm a grant manager. My name is Bernard. I'm the founder of Areta. We're a crypto-native investment bank, so we work along M&A secondaries, but also largely in governance, where I lead our initiatives. One of the grant programs that we are leading is the Uniswap Arbitrum grant program that basically came into place when Arbitrum airdropped the allocation to Uniswap, and we made a grant program out of it. And yeah, super happy to be here. I actually just come from the grant managers meetup and bring all the freshest problems with me. So very excited to discuss these here.
Hey everyone, I'm Matt from StableLab. We're a governance advisory firm. Right now in Arbitrum, we're the program manager for the long-term incentives pilot program, which is a grants program giving out maximum of 45 million ARB in incentives to protocols built on Arbitrum to try to increase activity on the chain.
Hey everyone, I'm Katin from ETHDenver. I'm currently managing I'm doing like operations for our domain on Questbook on education, community growth, and events. But apart from that, I'm also working on Kali, which is like with my role regarding to like web development and also legal stuff. But yeah, basically my role in the DAO has been as delegate for CLATAM and also within like this whole like Questbook program.
Hey folks, my name is Sean. I work with Plurality Labs, and we are focused on creating an environment where there's many different funding mechanisms for Arbitrum, because we know not one size fits all when it comes to grants.
Amazing. Well, thank you for those intros. So I'd like to kick off with the first question. So it would be great if you could reflect on the grants programs so far. And yeah, if you have any thoughts on a specific grant program which has been especially impactful for the DAO so far. Any opinions? Ideally one that you're not managing yourself to avoid self-shilling. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think, and this is also what I always have top of mind, if you enter the Arbitrum DAO and you're looking for grants, obviously we have by now a widespread basically selection of grant programs that might be a fit or might not be a fit. I think we might do a good job in like showing this more and communicating, okay, who should you talk to if you join the DAO and you land at this page where you see all the different grant programs. And we know right now it's a bit overloading or overwhelming for when you join the DAO. So I think that's one where we can work on and collaborate a bit and like aligning on how these things work together. And yeah, shout out to all the other grant programs and doing a good job from the outside. It looks always very amazing.
Okay, so I'll tell you about one that I'm especially proud of at the moment. So at Plurality Labs, we're trying not to manage grantees. We're trying to manage grant programs, which means we go find people that have got great ideas around managing grants or great ideas, and we try to give them funding so they can go execute those rounds for Arbitrum. One that I'm excited about right now is Joke Race. Joke Race is really an interesting platform, and it's a quick way to put money in people's pockets in a really short period of time. So over a 9-week period, each week there was 4 winners every week winning 2,500 ARB. So it's a quick way, if somebody has an idea, they can quickly post it on a forum and then have a community of voters who vote for what they think is the best idea that particular week. What I like about it, it's the super quick cycle. It's not a huge amount, so if somebody's just looking for some seed capital, it's a great way to get started and get them introduced to the Arbitrum ecosystem. So that's one side of it, and that's a quick way of quickly getting money in people's hands and getting them introduced to Arbitrum. So I'm not shilling for it, but I think it's an interesting experiment, and we'll see how that one turns out.
Yeah, and on our end from Questbook, maybe a bit of context on how this whole Questbook program works. There's 4 domains, one for dev tooling, one for new protocol ideas, one for gaming, and on our end, we're managing the one on, as I said, like education, community growth, and events. So I think like overall, we've done a pretty good job. Like the whole idea of this program is basically Firestarter. So you basically give like small grants to many programs. Our cap is of 25K, so it's not like a huge amount, but it's enough to make a significant impact. And we've supported roughly, I think, like between 50 or 60 programs so far between all the 4 domains. I can't speak that much on the other domains, but at least like on our domain, I'm pretty excited about the fact that we managed to support initiatives in basically every major region across the world. And also, we managed to support some initiatives that also run in parallel to what was going on in the DAO. For example, there was this one program from Layer 3, which were quests oriented in protocols that were applying to the STIP. So that was it was very nice to see that kind of like synergy between like the grants we were supporting and the DAO. But also more to the point, I feel like we did a pretty good job in supporting grants that aligned with our initial goals of going through institutions and hackathons. We have like programs like supporting like institutions in like community events in institutions in Nigeria and in India, hackathons in Brazil, etc. So I think it's been pretty cool in that end. But again, I think there's a lot to improve, particularly as you were saying, like comms. I think like not only internally within the DAO, because I'm pretty sure like most of us are like as a delegate as well. Like I'm not really that sure about what's going on between like all the programs, like all the grants, like what is being approved, because there's a lot of cool stuff going on, you know. But I think we have to do a better job in that end. So because imagine if it's difficult for us delegates to know what's going on, like imagine for grantees or imagine for like people that are outside the DAO, like that don't really know, you know. So I do think as a DAO we have to work better in that end, having some way to understand like where should grantees go, like if I want to do this, where should I go, who should give me the funding, and also support the grants that are funded by the DAO in a way that we give them further reach, because at least like I think it applies for every grant. Like it doesn't matter how good the idea is, it's kind of useless if nobody listens to it, you know? So I feel like that's my general reflection of it, and I know that there's people already working on it. I think that the foundation is also working on that end, like marketing-wise at least. So I think we're going on that track, but we have to push more.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like in designing these grants programs, you realize you can't tailor them to everyone in the DAO. You have to be somewhat specific. So then when people come to the DAO, it's hard for them to figure out which grants program they should apply to, which is a big challenge. I think that is something that STIP helped with before STIP, the short-term incentives program. Not too many people were familiar with the DAO, but once the DAO started giving out like large portions of money, a lot of people came to the DAO and became interested, which I think has been like pretty beneficial to the DAO. People have kind of stayed around and been interested in designing more grants programs and just being involved in governance in general, and realizing that there is like an impact they can make in the DAO and working towards future grants programs. And also just help people that are now more involved in the DAO know where to turn for the next grants program.
Nice, thank you for those answers. So Matt, your last point actually leads on nicely to my next question. So it was previously alluded to that it can be quite tricky, daunting for people approaching the DAO as a grantee to get a grant. What advice would you give to somebody coming to these grant programs on how to navigate and which to choose and why?
I hate to say it, but in the DAO world, somebody gave me some advice once. They said, you have to be relentless, right? And that's kind of it's a hard way to take the stance right now, but because we're so new at this, I think we do need to be relentless, and you have to have the passion and the conviction to say, I have a great idea, and I'm gonna find a way to make it get funded. Because, to Katin's earlier point, we have not done a great job at marketing. We've not done a great job so far at helping people understand exactly where to go. But what we have done a great job is many different ways of getting funding, and in fact, I would argue that there's probably more ways in Arbitrum to get funded than there is in any other ecosystem. I don't know how many programs there are right now in Arbitrum to get funded, but there's a ton of ways to get funded. What we haven't done so far yet is helping people get to those funds, and I'll say that that's our next step, and I think that's the challenge we all need to try and address.
Yeah, I think there's information on the Arbitrum Foundation's website that kind of breaks down each of the grants programs, like from a high level. So if you're like interested in getting some kind of grant, you first have to decide like what type of grant you want. Is it to build a new like product? Is it to get incentives for a product that already exists? Is it for some like community event? And then like go through. The forums are pretty hectic and it's hard to find exactly what you're looking for, but just kind of read through the like high level of these, and then also just reach out to anyone in the DAO. Like, the Arbitrum DAO is pretty amazing how communicative everyone is, and usually everyone is pretty happy to help answer any of those questions.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it, right? Like digging. Unfortunately, right now, until we solve or clean up the process a bit, and then as soon as you have the first touch point with the person and you communicate that you are actually looking for a grant, you typically end up over 2 or 3 edges in the right camp, at least for now.
Yeah, and just to add something about that, yeah, as you were saying, like, if you don't know where to go, just like DM a delegate, like bother us, like that's what we kind of are there for. So, yeah, I mean, people are always very supportive in that end. Like, even if sometimes like information might be messy, like delegates should be able to guide you, or we can do our best job, like our best effort in that end.
Nice, amazing. So leading on to the next question, this is about how there are just so many grants programs within the DAO so far. And how do you think the DAO should actually think about having these grant programs running in parallel tracks? And how do you think that these programs can have better alignment across them, so nobody's stepping on toes?
I think, I mean, what we've done a good job at right now is, you know, if you look at it as a funnel and the more activity you put in, ideally, you know, at some point you will get more activity out. I think the middle part and like how effective that is and like do we get the, you know, biggest bang for the buck, this we are on to optimize. So I think for now in the stage that we're at, and also largely driven by you guys over there, in like spreading wide and experimenting with a lot of different, you know, ways to allocate capital and get it into the hands of many builders. I think we are at a good job. I think now we need to take the step in, okay, streamlining it so they don't overlap, you know, cleaning it up a bit. So whenever a grantee arrives, he knows, okay, this is the one program that I'm eligible for ideally. And maybe if I'm in another growth stage, then there's another program that I'm eligible for. But yeah, I think so far we're on a good trajectory with that, hopefully.
So I'll take so Bernard is absolutely right on point in terms of the key point is we want builders to know that they can come to Arbitrum and find funding to build what they're passionate about and what fits our strategic direction, right? So that's our key point, is making sure that builders know they can come to Arbitrum and they can get funding, because we know that crypto is going to survive when we bring those next 3 billion users, and we want them to come to Arbitrum. So at this early stage, we're innovating. We're trying to find those programs that work, and quite frankly, some of the programs we're trying may not work. What we need to get better at is finding those programs that are not working, canceling them, killing them, or giving them the coaching so that they can get better. And the ones that are doing a great job, like Questbook, scale the hell out of it, right? So we need to find those programs that are doing a great job and scale it. And in addition to that, make sure that we're still trying those innovative things to help make funding easier so we can bring builders to Arbitrum.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's pretty crucial to have like many different grants programs running in the DAO. It's pretty impossible to design a process that can accommodate every type of grants. Like giving out $1 million grant is much different than giving out a $25,000 grant. You need different like councils or processes or DAO votes to make those different types of decisions. So I think it's important we continue to have and expand these different grants programs, but what we need to do better at is communicating between the different grants programs, like referring people that apply to different grants programs if they would be a better fit, and then just continuing to improve them as we grow the DAO.
Yeah, I think I agree with basically everything that's been stated. We're at a very interesting situation right now, because I mean, we've already approved like a lot of programs so far, so we're just gonna have to see like what the impact actually is, you know? Because, okay, right now we might think, okay, everything is working, but maybe in a couple of months, like, we might think a different way about it. So it's gonna be very interesting. I think we have to be very careful, do a lot of follow-up, and see what's working, what's not, and just like go harder on what's working.
Cool, thank you. And yeah, kind of a follow-up question. Do you think the DAO should be concerned about grantees double dipping across these programs with basically the same scope?
Not so much. Like, I think it should be disclosed and people should be aware that they're getting grants from different areas, but I don't see it as an issue if both grants programs are like, this is a good project that we need to fund. They need funding like for building, but they also need funding for incentives, or they need funding for like outreach or something. If both programs think it's a good project to fund, then it probably makes sense to give them more money.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's just going to be at the discretion of like whoever is allocating the grant, like, because at the end, like, a lot of these builders, like, they are already in the ecosystem, so it just makes sense, like, to support them on different ends. But obviously, like, if someone just comes, like, to different grants, like, for the same thing, of course not, you know. But that, again, I think that ties back to the whole idea of having better comms and everybody having a better idea of what's going on, because I think we've had cases, or like at least people like in like around Questbook, like in Questbook grants, like going between different domains. But in the end, there was not any issue with that. But I mean, it could happen, you know. So, and if it can happen within just like one program, I don't imagine like at a DAO scale, yeah.
So it's to me, so what was it, like 2 or 3 months ago, Gitcoin funded a research project, and Michelle and Eugene put together an excellent report, and it was the state of grants in Web3. One of the key points that they outlined there was not so much double dipping, but determining what kind of impact the spending has, right? Because in the early days of crypto, of Web3 grants, the objective was to get rid of the money. Okay, we need to mature past that to the point to where we say, let's distribute the funds to the most deserving contributors, and let's make sure that those funds have impact. When we're at the point to where we can compare the impact from funding Project A, funding Project B, and funding Project C, that's the point that we can determine that our spending is really efficient. So I'm less worried about double dipping, and I'm more worried about how are we going to be able to report the effectiveness and the impact of the spending that we have. That's the problem that I'm trying to think about.
And do you have any answers to how grant programs can measure impact?
Okay, so how long was our conversation this morning? You know, talking with like super smart people like Daniel from Arendelle and with Mahesh from Karma. That's the exact problem we're talking about this morning, is how do you compare different grant recipients when they're at different parts of their life cycle? For example, if you take something like Arendelle is trying to create a cohort of people who are at the very brand new stages, they have an idea, and to get that, how do you compare that with somebody who has participated in a retroactive funding grant? I don't know, but that's the problem we need to try and figure out. These are some tough problems, and the reason why it hasn't been done, because it's hard. So, Ram, that's kind of a chicken shit way of saying I don't know, but it's a problem we're going to fix. How's that?
That's fair enough.
Yeah, I second that, and I think you can approach it from different, you know, angles basically. So if you think about if you go down the road and say, okay, let's make it more constrained and be more narrow in the RFPs that we want to fund, and say, okay, there's a specific thing in, I don't know, growing the ecosystem via whatever, right? And we set 5 KPIs that all the grantees need to achieve that apply for the program. We'll probably, in that initiative, add more outcome for all the grant programs, for the grantees, but at the same time, obviously limits a lot who can participate and how we can allocate capital. So it's a balance that we kind of need to find between being very, KPI outcome driven and being open for anything and setting, new milestones for a new initiative that we might not even have thought through before.
Yeah, I think that's quite an issue as well. Like in our program, at least like in our domain, not that much, because they get paid by milestone, and it's like within a set amount of time. But then I'm thinking about, like, for example, on the domain on dev tooling, that's something that should be there for a while. You know, like how do you ensure that that's gonna like have an impact beyond the domain, like how long the domain lasts, because we have a time of like 6 months only. So I do think it's gonna be quite an issue to ensure that like whatever we're funding or whatever we're supporting actually has an impact in the long term, you know. And yeah, we haven't figured that out like at all.
I do think it's important to like fund the analysis of a lot of these programs, which is something that's not always considered when like designing the program. Like in the long-term incentives pilot program, we have 200K are allocated towards research bounties, which is going to go to like impartial research teams to basically analyze if the pilot program was actually any improvement over a STIP, or if the whole thing was a mistake, or really find out like what we need to know about giving out incentives for moving forward into a new program, which I think will yield some interesting results from like research teams not actually associated with the proposal itself.
Great. Well, yeah, those are all of my questions, but we do have a few minutes left. So yeah, I was wondering if anyone in the audience have any questions for our panelists. And I will bring you a mic.
Where was that happening?
Hello. I guess so I'm from Franklin Dow. We're a student group. We work on behalf of grants a lot of the times, right? Like we have to get funded. I'm wondering like if you have groups who aren't necessarily working on projects for the ecosystem, but more so like just trying to work within the ecosystem. What's the best thing to look for, and what's the highest impact thing that we can do?
Okay, so I love the question, because what you're articulating is there's a need for funding for people that don't necessarily have a specific project that is in mind, but there's still work to be done, right? And if you think about it, grant allocation is really just a form of governance. And what we're talking about is how do you take a need and how do you find a resource and fit the resource to that need so work gets done and the DAO moves forward, really? So that's really what we're trying to do. So I think the question really is, what work needs to get done in the DAO? In Arbitrum, there's a lot of work that needs to get done, right? And then how do we connect the funding to those people who can do the work and create impact? So if you're a student organization looking for a place to find impact, on the forum, there's tons of information, there's tons of conversation going back and forth. I think there's probably at least 5 meetings each month talking about the work that needs to be done. And as I mentioned before, in the DAO, you kind of have to be relentless and to find like the need and to propose an idea that could have impact. You propose that idea, and then one of us up here will try and evaluate it quickly and determine if there's an impact that if we can get funding that direction and get you working in the Arbitrum ecosystem, because we need lots of help. I don't know if that helped. I hope that answers your question, yeah? Cool.
And
Can I just add something on that? Like, I do think that as a DAO, we do have to. I think there was a proposal in the hackathon as well on how can we support contributors, because I do think that we need further incentives towards supporting contributors, because a lot of people make this mistaken idea that you have to be a delegate to have an impact on the DAO, but you don't have to. You don't need that voting power responsibility. We've had a lot of people that are not delegates that have made some of the most impactful proposals to the DAO. So I do think we do need something more solid to address that specific issue. But at the moment, you can still just go for it. People can get paid for proposals. Obviously, it depends how you frame it, but there's always those opportunities.
Yeah, and maybe to add up on that, right now we have the certain filter of, first level of commitment, if we want to call it like that. If it's a good thing or bad thing, I think is, up for debate. But then, if you probably, in the default case, if you really think, okay, I want to contribute and do something, improve the DAO, spending a day and just grinding yourself through the forums, which can be a messy exercise, and then joining a community call, as Sean said, right? We have many of these where we actually map out what needs to be fixed, and then with some, creative, or creativity, you can probably end up at something, very valuable. I think one thing that we are all working on, and very excited also what came out of the hackathon in terms of onboarding or enabling contributors, is that to get through, larger paid initiatives, it's not that easy right now. So it's a bit this, game that you see in many different styles. You need to connect with many different people, present it to many different people, and it's not that super straightforward yet. So I think personally very excited about facilitating that for outside contribution.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Any more questions from the room? Okay. If not, I actually just thought of another question, which is probably quite relevant given some of the recent discussion I've seen on the forums. But yeah, there's been a lot of debate about whether people wanting grants from the DAO are better off coming to grant programs or just directly asking the whole DAO. What do you see some of the pros and cons of either pathway are?
So I think the question was, should a grantee go to the DAO or go to one of the grant programs, correct?
Yeah. And what are the pros and cons of either?
Yeah, so if I put myself in the chair of a delegate, man, you guys have a ton of work to do. It's just the amount of proposals that are out there and the amount of time that you have to dedicate into understanding each one of these proposals so you can make a good decision. The way that I think about the future is that there's almost like a certain threshold to where it makes sense to go to the DAO or it makes sense to go to the foundation, whereas another case, whereas it makes sense to go to one of the grant providers to kind of get the right level of funding. And to the point earlier is we need to get better at giving direction or helping the grantees wayfind what's the right place to seek that granting. And part of the problem is, and I'll let you in on a dirty secret, is we don't exactly know that just yet. I don't think the DAO necessarily knows that just yet. That's one of those things that we need to figure out, and once we do, communicate it back to the community so that you know if you're seeking funding, where do you get it? Where's the best place to get it from?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, like personally, I'm more of a fan of DAOs handling their funding directly into grants. Like, I think that's like in an ideal world, like DAOs should decide how their money is spent, like, and delegates deciding, but it's not scalable. Like, it just doesn't work. As you said, like, there's so much going on, it's very difficult to keep track of every single grant, and I think that's why we have so many grant programs, And I think that, yeah, I mean, in the end, it often ends up like depending on how much funding you need, or at least, like, for example, in Questbook's case, like, we are capped. We can't give out grants that are beyond 25K. But I do think there's a lot of value as well, like, for people that want to receive grants, like, with greater funding that might be for projects that are more robust, to go to the forum, because there's sometimes like people doing stuff for the DAO that's going to benefit the delegates in the end, or like the people that are in the ecosystem. So I do think that discussion can or should be public and could benefit from a lot of feedback. But in the end, I do think it makes more sense, like, for like the funds to be managed by the individual grant programs.
Yeah, I think the advantage of individual proposals is it obviously moves much quicker through the DAO, which can be good, but it also can be overwhelming if everyone starts doing that, and then we have hundreds of proposals flooding the DAO and like drowning out some other things we're trying to do in the DAO. So I think it's generally easier for protocols to get funded through these large grant programs because it creates some kind of process for them to like make sure delegates are looking at their proposals and making sure they're evaluating them fairly and all that stuff. But if you have like a really innovative idea and you think you could have a grant would really help you launch this on Arbitrum, like, I definitely recommend going straight to the DAO if you think it is something that it's like time sensitive and people would care about, because anyone like can post to the forum and to snapshot at any point if you think your proposal is good enough.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks. I found those answers pretty insightful. And yeah, I'm just very excited to see how all of your respective grant programs continue growing the Arbitrum ecosystem. So appreciate your work and thank you.
Little shout out maybe, because I think it's quite exciting that we have all the people in the room here, like also people that applied to grant programs or wanted to apply and didn't do it in the course of the day or the next hours, if you want to, just dump what you've experienced to one of us, I think would be a very valuable exercise in like us fixing that afterwards or thinking about ways to fix that. So I think that'd be a cool opportunity. And thanks.
Yeah, good advice.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you.